Jesus, Bob, what button did you push? I'm Rob, that's Liam, and this week we watched the 1994 action Speed, or as it was nearly called, Minimum Speed. Oh, and welcome to Here You Goes podcast. Kind of like calling Die Hard Die Soft, or it could have been called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down. We follow Jack Traven attempting to rescue a bus full of passengers from blowing up after our madman Howard Payne plants a bomb on said bus. Once the bus drops below 50, bang, no more bus. Speed delivers on the action, intensity, and acting, but man, it does raise some questions. We will get into jumping the bus on a pretty flat piece of road, or Jack going under the bus with no issues. But the major question is how much must you love cans to keep them in a pram or make baby faces at them while crossing the road? I mean, talk about a fucking MacGuffin. It's all very odd indeed. But hey, Liam, welcome back from your trip to America. I can see you are raring to go. So
Yeah, I haven't got jet lag at all. That was one of the points I actually made about the cans in the pram. Like, one, has that ever not worked on screen? Like, it's always dramatic. However, how different if is this movie if it's not cans in that pram? If Jan de Bont had the bottle to be like, oh, it's a fucking baby,
yeah,
that she just hits a pram, kills the baby, how different is the rest of the movie? Because they still got to drive the bus.
yeah,
Like, no matter that she's killed the baby, but it's like, no, you got to keep your foot down, Annie. We've
yeah.
just got to deal with this.
Well, with
And it's just
everyone
like,
calling her a murderer on the bus for the rest of. I mean, if
yeah,
this
it's like
film
it's
was
already sucks. Like, the situation's tense, but if Annie, like, who everybody wants to support because she's driving the bus, but she is just mowed down a baby, and it's everyone knows it's not her fault. It's like, she's driving a bus with a bomb in it. It has to keep going 50 miles per hour, and this woman's not paying attention. She pushes a pram out in front of it, and the baby just gets annihilated. I just don't know what kind of tone you get for the next 90 minutes. But yes, it is invariably a different movie. But needless
if
to say,
this
I'm glad they went for the traditional approach and it was just cans rather than actual fucking baby.
if this film is filmed in 2024, though, it's a dog in a dog pushchair, isn't it?
It probably is, but that's even
Yeah,
worse.
yeah.
Like, you
I
can,
knew you'd say that. It's
well,
worse to
it
kill
is.
the
You've
dog than
seen
the
it in
baby.
movies. Like, killing humans, absolutely fine. Killing babies, super bad.
Yeah, but
Killing
I
dogs on
think
screen, unthinkable.
I think
Unthinkable.
there's an age limit. I do think killing humans fine, as you said, on screen,
On screen. Yeah.
but not babies, dude.
No, it's not fine. Like, don't get me wrong. The difference between killing a baby on screen and killing a human on screen, if we're doing the Speed podcast, right, is absolutely ginormous. It's really close to the dog thing. But I don't know, man. There's something about the idea of just killing a dog on screen, which is just super brutal.
I
But
want to play.
don't get me wrong, it's super bad when you kill a baby as well. Needless to say, if anything in that pram, like if it's not cans and it's not miraculously a full-grown man, which you'd be like, well, it's weird that he was in there, but I'm glad that wasn't a fucking baby. Then yeah, you're dealing with a strange movie all the same. But
People are playing this podcast as evidence of our trial. I feel
yeah,
like the beginning of this doesn't seem good for us.
it doesn't seem good at all. But the movie itself, you were right with the intro. Like, it has some weird moments. And I actually think for 60 minutes, when people think of this movie, I think people mostly think of those 60 minutes from the moment the initial bus blows up and Dennis Hopper calls Keanu on the phone, just
Yeah,
magically. He's like, yeah, I guess I should answer that. And he gives the greatest bit of movie exposition of all time. It's so to the point. It's basically giving you the plot. Jack actually needs to hear it as much as you do, and you are just fucking off to the races. So for the next 60 minutes, magic bus flying over a bridge aside, which is still an amazing scene, but like you said, it doesn't make any sense if you stop and think about it. For 60 minutes, this is like up there with Die Hard. It is unbelievable. However, people forget that 30 minutes beforehand, you get the whole scene with the elevator and all that jazz.
yeah.
And then that bit actually held up better than I thought it was going to. The end still isn't fantastic, and we'll get to that in due
the,
time. But
the end is Robbie. It's ironic that you put didn't hold up the beginning.
Mhm.
Does every roof have a crane on top to hold up the lift?
I don't think that's a real thing.
Like
But it's
he
cool.
went straight. It's cool, but he's like,
Yeah,
I know what to do. Let's go straight to the roof where you have the roof crane. Like
of course.
I have to
The
argue.
classic roof crane.
So as I wrote it down, I was questioning. I wonder if anyone was going to tell me off. Is it for window washers?
Well, that is one thing. When I was over in the States recently, I saw so much more than I saw here. Admittedly, I was going to Chicago, and Chicago has like maybe the second tallest skyline in the United States, an array of massive buildings. But one thing you do notice is these fucking daredevils hanging off the side of these buildings, washing windows.
Yeah.
And I assume maybe that's what the crane is for rather than lift. Although I will say the opening credits for this movie, despite the font being a little bit 90s, is very cool as the kind of, and it's got that kind of 90s slickness, and certainly for a
Yeah.
Jan de Bont film, everything about this film is super slick. You can see that, he comes from a background of cinematography. Everything about this movie looks great, even when they're just talking, the camera's never still. And it all starts with those opening credits when you're going up in the elevator with the credits going. That elevator goes on for fucking ever. It's one of those things you don't get it nowadays. Nowadays, everyone's kind of like, oh, we need to start this movie quickly before these TikTokers fucking lose focus. Whereas in the 90s, they're like, you start a film, this big action movie, and we're like, yeah, we're going to have like a solid 3 minutes of just names on the screen.
It's interesting, as you said, the opening, though, because, first thing I wrote out, I liked the credits, but it felt very Demolition Man. Like, I don't know what it was about.
It's not just that. I'll tell you what it is. It's the music. It is by what's his name? I had it down. Oh my god, just give me 1 second. Mark Mancina. And basically, when I was watching, I was like, why does this sound like every 90s action movie I've ever seen? And it's because this guy did Call of Duty, which inherently sounds 90s, Bad Boys, Cliffhanger, Con Air, all these action movies, they were all scored by this guy. And that's why the start of it just sounds like every 90s action film you've ever seen.
But it was good as well because we had the credits, as you said, and it feels Demolition Man. The score is great. I love the score. I wrote that down as well. But then it kind of slows down a bit because then it goes into Howard Payne and him stabbing that poor guy in the ear. And I say slow down.
That was brutal, right?
Like, it was terrible.
It's completely out of place with the rest of the film. The first thing he says is,
I don't know
this
if it is
isn't personal, and then commits one of the most personal feeling deaths I've ever seen on screen.
He's willing to, and what I liked about it, like, he is willing to do to get his weird 3 mil, which doesn't feel like a lot this day and age, but back in 94,
it's a little bit Dr. Evil, isn't it? $1 million. Like, really? Is that all you fucking want?
But it kind of feels slow. And then all of a sudden kicks into overdrive when you get that unnecessary car jump.
Oh, dude, that was the next thing I was going to bring up.
But they're not even.
There's no race. There's no chase. They just need to pull up. They go over the ridge, and that car is fucked.
Yeah,
that car's fucked.
It's so funny because it's not like it's carrying onto a car chase. Like, you've introduced our heroes who are chasing a bad guy.
They just pull it up.
It's that unnecessary car jump, and then he parallel parks it, and they get out and they put their stuff on. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, it's like, was there a scene missing? Because, like you said, it feels like you are suddenly placed into the middle of a chase. And then you realize, like you said, they just pull up, reverse park, check their gear. I was like, wait, what the fuck was up with that jump, fellas? I'd be like, imagine that was your car and you got Keanu driving it because you're like, well, we got to get here pretty swift. And he just sends it over the top of the fucking hill. Dude, the suspension's fucked. The tires are all going to need replacing. And then he shoots him later as well. And by the way,
aren't they in LA as well? Sorry, aren't they in LA as well? Isn't it flat? Like, where are they jumping?
I mean, whenever I see a hill in a movie in America, I just
San Francisco.
Assume of course, it's San Francisco, but I don't think it is San Francisco though.
No, I think it's LA.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry, I interrupted you. You said something about Jack.
Oh, no, I was just saying Jack being a bit of an asshole. Like, when he it's obviously kind of planted earlier. The whole idea is shoot the hostage, and then Harry's being caught by Dennis Hopper, so he's like, shoot me.
Yeah.
Usually, I thought he was going to shoot him like just above the knee. He shoots him like just southeast of his testicles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dangerously close to a lot of stuff that high up on the leg. I was just like, yeah, I'd be like, you shot me, you prick as well. I don't know. But, I love Keanu in this, but sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want, before we move on, in regards to the shooting, as you just said, because what's the gap between the lift job or the elevator job for Americans, the lift job and the bus job? Because when they get their medal, Harry is pretty much healed. He's just got a bit of a limp. So it's not like they did it the next day, is it? Yeah. It's not like they took him out. No. So what is the gap? Like,
I think it's a bit, because I think the idea is that Dennis Hopper, or what's his name? Howard? Is that his character's name?
Howard Payne, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to plan this attack. And he's like, for the most part, that kind of makes sense because that, you know, he's always ahead of the game. He's always one step ahead of everyone else, and they almost apply like he's a bit of an evil genius. But then he totally gets done later on in the film by like the die packing the money, the fucking most like clumsy. Oh, like you think of all the things to look out for if you're asking for $3 million from like the U.S. government, is that they're going to put a die pack in the money. It's like, I don't know shit about any of that, but that'd be the first thing I'd be on the phone like, if any of you put a die pack on this, I'm going to blow something up. You know, give you.
I got to give him a bit of credit.
That's an oversight on his part.
I got to give him a bit of credit. Maybe die packs weren't a thing then back in the early 90s. I don't remember seeing much of them.
I thought they were in every movie, and weren't they in Point Break as well? And that's one of the points we've even not even brought up. I mean, we're saying
they were in Point Break because I'll take it back because they knew which one it was because they chuck it into the air.
Yeah, and that was that was 3 years before.
91. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Keanu Reeves was in like 3 of the best action movies of the 90s, and you can, you know, I love Keanu, and this is a perfect Keanu role because he's simultaneously brilliant and terrible at the same time. But it's like he was in Point Break, Speed, and The Matrix all in the same decade. Like that's a fucking amazing run. And in every single one of them, he's like different levels of brilliant and terrible, but all at the same time. It's like this opening sequence. I'm not like. Throughout the film, he's going for like a stoic politeness is the only way I could describe it. That's what he's going for the entire film, and he gets there eventually. But in these opening sections with Harry, Jeff Daniels, he's constantly pulling a face, like for this whole sequence with the lift and all that jazz. And I'm like, he does stop pulling this face, right? He does, but for that opening sequence, you just have to deal with whatever the fuck he was doing with his grill.
And I think that is more down to the fact that it was changed halfway through, because I think Jack's character changed as well, because Harry was originally going to be the partner to Howard. Harry and Howard, he was going to be the partner. There was going to be more of Jeff Daniels. So I kind of think that on the fly, then they kind of changed it. So Jack's character, but they'd already filmed the lift scene. So you got a different version of Jack at the beginning than you get halfway through.
That makes sense because he does almost, not completely, but there is a hint of him being a slightly different character in that opening scene.
Yeah.
It's like basically in the intro, what he reminds me of is like a bit of a sliding doors thing. Like if Johnny Utah hadn't learned to surf and just stayed a cop, then he might have ended up being Jack Traven. Like that's the kind of character he was leaning towards. Whereas, like you said, after that sequence, it's very much stoic politeness, which I love the fact that they commit to because there's so many opportunities for, and you think like, if they were making this film in 2024, it would be an absolute quip fest. It would just be like Marvelization. They'd be like, oh, there's got to be a joke every 2 minutes. In this film, he doesn't have any quipping until the end of the film when all of a sudden he delivers like 2 back-to-back, which is really weird. Like the whole thing about him losing his head and like, oh, at least I'm taller. Like those 2 really quippy lines come literally seconds after each other. And they're the only quips in the film. Like they set him, it almost feels like for the rest of the film, they're setting him up for quips, but he's too stoic to deliver on them. So he just ends up being polite and cool, and that's it. And at the end of the movie, he turns into James Bond for fucking 3 minutes.
Yeah, but at the end of the movie is weird. But I don't want to go into the end of the movie. No, you mentioned Speed, Matrix, and Point Break. You've nearly hit the set. You've hit 3 of his 4 known fors on IMDb.
Don't say Johnny Mnemonic is the fucking 4th one, because I was going to say, as good as those are, they still don't make up for Johnny Mnemonic because that film is ass. Speed.
I love Johnny Mnemonic.
I've literally got that written down. Rob will love Johnny Mnemonic. That film.
I thought Johnny Mnemonic was great.
It's a terrible movie.
Oh, but I'm gonna while you think of the 4th one, I'm gonna get it out there now. I like Speed 2. So we'll get that later, but I like Speed 2. Speed
2 is, I mean, don't get me wrong, Speed 2 is much better than Johnny Mnemonic, make no mistake. It's ill-conceived from the very start. Like, so much of this film is, the concept is brilliant, but so much of it relies on that chemistry between Keanu and Sandra Bullock, which is, very hard to capture. It's just, I don't know why they have that chemistry, because again, he's playing it so stoic for most of the movie, but they just do. They're great individually, but when they're on screen, they're fucking dynamite. So you can't get Keanu back. A, what's the point? And then B, you set it on a cruise liner. Like, A
That's the
cruise
one
fucking liner.
thing that can't go fast. Is funny as fuck to me.
It's
Uh,
inherently like, surely somebody, as they were like planning this, writing the script, they were like, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. We could do like a fucking plane. We could do a train. You want to do on a cruise line? And somebody making the, if you turn that up to the max, you could get a fair couple of knots. It's like, dude, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible fucking idea. It's an okay made film, but it's based on a terrible idea.
I derailed you a little bit. What's his fourth?
It's not like Bram's. I want to believe it's Devil's Advocate or something fucking awesome like that.
It it honestly feels like a cop out. It does. It feels like a
Cop-out.
cop out. Yeah.
I can't think that. I mean, go for it.
The Matrix Speed, Point Break, and The Matrix Reloaded. Oh,
Oh,
come
okay.
on.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The Matrix Reloaded was like the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. And despite the opinions on it, it was like at the time when that was coming out, if that like the biggest movie in the world, until people decided they weren't fussed on. I actually really like Matrix Reloaded. But I don't like it when they like you said, especially when you're like Keanu Reeves and he's got this massive body of work. Don't use one of the sequels. It's like if you go to Sylvester Stallone and it's like 3 of them are Rambo movies or 3 Rocky movies. Like, come on, guys, get Copland in there for fuck's sake. But hey,
Copland is great.
Definitely replace Matrix Reloaded with Devil's Advocate, because that film is like Keanu himself, simultaneously terrible and fucking awesome. It's one of the most watchable movies.
Is that the one where he's got the like New Orleans accent?
Yeah, he's got like a southern accent, and it's got Charlize Theron with a terrible haircut, and it's got Al Pacino going big as the devil.
All I remember about that film is on the train where he's talking to this guy who's trying to rob him, and he says in like Spanish, "Your friends at the moment, he's fucking your missus up the ass or something."
Oh yeah. Like I said, there's great moments, and it's a great concept. It's often quite bad, but it's one of those movies I just can't. There's a certain collection of films where if it's on TV and you put it on for a second, you're like, I'm fucking watching this whole film. Devil's Advocate has just always been one of those movies, despite the fact that I suspect that objectively it's quite bad. But hey ho, anyway. But yeah, to bring it back to Keanu, this is a movie of chemistry. Like, even though they're not on screen together much, like he and Dennis Hopper to a certain extent have solid chemistry. Yeah. Obviously, he and Sandra Bullock are absolute dynamite on screen, but he's great with Jeff Daniels as well. Like, whatever you might say about him, he's just good on. It's the reason Point Break works. It's like he's amazing on screen with Patrick Swayze. That'd be a different movie. That bromance is born of that chemistry. He just seems to bring it out with people.
Well, I totally agree. And his chemistry at the beginning with Jeff Daniels, I think is great. I wrote a couple of things down about the beginning. His chemistry was one of them. But you said he doesn't really give quips until the end. You missed one of the best quips. It actually made me laugh. What's going to stop the elevator? The basement. I thought that was a great line.
That is actually a good one.
Yeah.
Although, did it drive you? Sorry, carry on.
Sorry. As they're running up, that like they got 6 minutes left. I think it was. They did a Lawrence 6 minutes. But initially they had to climb 32 flights. Yeah, if that was me, the clock would have elapsed like an hour ago. I would be fucked.
Between the steps and that fucking woman in the lift, they would have been fucked. Now, I wanted nothing more than them to just let her die. She's like one of those pandas that refuses to fuck. She just deserves to die. Like, she's like, there's the annoying lady on the bus later on. I think her name was Helen, who also dies. She's annoying, but in fairness to Helen, it's not her fault, because they've just been told by Dennis Hopper, it's like, you're only allowed to take that one person off. If anyone else comes off, you're getting blown up. If you notice in that sequence, both the cops on that truck driving alongside the bus are both saying to her, come on, jump, you can make it. They're totally, she's a douche. Don't get me wrong, Helen, her voice is annoying. I wasn't that sad to see her go. But it wasn't her fault she died. If she's standing there, she wants to get off that bus, and then the cop's like, yeah, go for it. She's going to fucking go for it. But the woman in the lift is like, if you're not strong enough to just sneak over literally 2 steps and take his hand, maybe Darwinian law suggests that you have to fucking go, sadly.
She's been in fucking loads as well, Helen Beth Grant. She has been absolute loads of films.
What? Oh, the actress, you mean?
Yeah, Beth Grant. Yeah, well, not the character Helen. No, Beth Grant. She is.
Yeah. I was going to say. Well, that's one of my criticisms of the movie, is that for the most part, like, I love this movie for the most part. I mentioned the fact that we'll get to the finale in the end. Is that maybe other than Alan Ruck, the cast of characters on the bus are slightly forgettable. You feel like, you had this opportunity to have this really unique and interesting cast of characters, and he's maybe the only one who leaves a mark. Like Helen does because she's annoying, but other than that, the only other one, and he leaves the bus early, is Hawthorne James as Sam, the bus driver, who, make no mistake, could have ended this film much earlier if he wasn't a fucking dick. Like, if you've got a guy running next to your bus like that, screaming, showing his fucking badge, dude, just stop the bus for a minute. Like, if he stops the bus, it doesn't get above 50, everyone goes home.
It wasn't just his fault, though. Annie was being devil's advocate, and Annie was in the background. Just leave him. Like, she's like, I don't want this confrontation. I just want to get to work. So she was being a bit of a dick as well in the back, just sending him off. Maybe I'm just, because we are very much a Sandra Bullock household, and I am quite in love with Sandra Bullock, and especially 1994 Sandra Bullock. But yeah, in that moment, you're like, dude, just fucking stop the bus, man. The character that had the most impact was actually not even on the bus. It was Glenn Plummer as Jaguar owner. Like, he is fucking. He's great in it. Like, right at the beginning as well, he goes, "Not again. I own this car. I didn't steal it." I'm like, already we've got some racial profiling going on. This is fucking wrong.
Well, it was the early 90s, so.
Yeah, but it's when they're in the car, then he's panicking. He's like, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden, Keanu does this nice little move, and he goes, "Nice move, man." It's like, oh my God, he's saving my car. Are you insured? Yeah, I am insured. Why? No. He was so good, man.
And those sequences were, I mean, let's be clear, like Jan de Bont is out of his mind. Like, between this movie and almost killing like Helen Hunt and most of the other cast members when he filmed Twister.
Yeah.
It's like he's not one of those directors who has any issue with the actors putting themselves in jeopardy. Like, he almost insists. It did work for this movie because you can see, even though it's not like fucking Mission Impossible level style stunts, but whether it be him going under the bus, him jumping over to the bus, the stuff in the car, it does help, especially with these older movies, now that they're in HD, that it is actually Keanu, because we've run across this problem a few times with this podcast. Like, say, as great as True Lies is, there are a few moments where, due to that HD 4K upgrade, you're like, oh, that clearly isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger on that horse. You could get away with it in the 90s, but now with this, like, amazing clarity you have with these movies, you're like, you just have to deal with the fact that it's some other dude on the horse for a second.
Well,
you don't get any of that here because Jan de Bont's out of his mind and Keanu was willing to go with it, so he was doing
that's what sold it to Keanu, because Keanu originally didn't want to do it because it sounded too much like Die Hard. And then with a bit of the writing, I suppose he saw the script and stuff, but it was the fact that Jan de Bont said, basically, as you said, I'll let you do most of the stunts. So I think Keanu did like 90% of the stunts, because the one that really shocked me was the one I said about him fitting under the bus. When they put him on that sled and they just let him go. Because originally when he's going and they're all staring at him going, he's out of his mind, it doesn't look like he's going to get under the guard. Like, it doesn't look like he's going to fit under.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I think if you watch that initial shot, it's just the bus is normal. You're like, there's not enough fucking clearance. Yeah. But then on the next shot, I think they've removed or moved up part of the bus so we can get into the initial part, basically the bumper of the bus. Because underneath the bus, I can get it once he's under there, like there would be a bit of a rise. But the front of it, I'm like, dude, there's nowhere for him to go. There's just nowhere. But
the exact same thing.
We are talking about a movie which has that jump. Now, spoiler alert, that is my favorite sequence in the movie. The other than maybe the bus blowing up in the beginning, as I mentioned, like some of the greatest exposition of all time and how quickly you get on the bus and you're just off to the races, so to speak. The jump is amazing. The way they set it up. What's his name? Captain McMahon, Joe Morton, who when I ever see him, I always think of him from Terminator 2. I don't know how long I can hold this. He always has that sequence. But
his breathing gets me every time.
Absolutely. I love the fact that he has a map in his pocket. It's like everyone's fucking fired. Like nobody knew the fucking road was out. Funny. And you see it, and of course, when the bus goes off the jump, and I think they've done it in Mythbusters, nobody survives it. When you do the long shot, there's no incline. It's just flat. It's just a gap in the fucking. But I love it because that just goes. It doesn't even get like the whole bus distance. It gets the front wheels off. I don't care how fast it's going, and then it just drops straight down. Everyone dies.
It's funny as well because all of a sudden then it's angled perfectly where the front of it is like it's gone like a 45
Oh
degree
yeah,
angle
yeah.
where it's just like it's gone over the biggest ramp in the world, and it was like the slight incline that it might have was ridiculous. What I read about though, I'll touch on the facts here a little bit, was they had to film that twice because the first time it landed too perfectly. It
Oh
landed
yeah, it
too
went too far.
perfectly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It went
So
too
they
far and
they
landed
had to
too
film it
perfectly.
again.
Which don't get me wrong, like, and this leads to another one of the big questions of the film. Like, if you actually stop and think about it, say if we remove away the incline and say there was magically a ramp there, so it makes the jump, and we just buy into that. There is no way they retain that bus going 50 miles per hour. There's no way that it doesn't drop below
No,
50. There's no fucking
it's
way.
dropped straight. There's no way she's getting it back to the accelerator straight away because she's shook up. It's ridiculous.
Even if she had her feet down, the tires go. You have the same problem with the needless car jump earlier. The suspension's fucked. The bus isn't built for that. And yeah, it would just like, even in a perfect world, that goes down to like 10 miles per hour for at least a few seconds.
I run out of ideas as well because the train track wasn't finished,
Oh
and then they
yeah,
jumped the train. And he said to my wife, because I watched this with my wife, and I said,
I know.
"It's watching the same fucking thing." By the way,
Just
the
on a train.
train,
Basically, maybe that's why they didn't do Speed 2, because Speed 2 happens in Speed 1. They
yeah,
just jumped to a train, and I was just like, I can't believe I forgot about this. They're just doing the same thing. Oh, there's no track again. You've got to be fucking shitting me. I mean, maybe because so many. All right, we're just dealing with the end of this film now. There are so many dumb things that happen at the end of this film. So, one, what would you call it? The the lookouts and everything, the sting operation at the end of the film to
yeah,
catch
yeah.
Hopper is one of the worst constructed of all time. It's far too obvious. The shooters are all clearly visible. It's clearly a sting operation. You think he's not going to fucking, like, he's just going to run out and just take the money and just not take a look around? You dumbasses. Two, I don't even know what Annie's doing there at that point.
I wrote that down. Why is Annie not in the hospital? Why did the fucking paramedics go, you know what, we'll just drop you off by here and you can
Why?
just
It
wait?
makes no sense. So that all makes zero sense. And then the moment that Jack like ends up on top of the train, you've got a guy, he's like 60 years old, he's got one hand for all intents and purposes. He somehow in a split second gets on top of the train and totally gets the drop on Jack.
Sneaks up on him.
How the fuck did he do that? Like, there's just no way. There is no way he's getting up there. There's no way he's just magically. I guess you can make the argument once he's up there, it's on top of a train, it's mega loud. He might get the drop on him. He's just not fucking getting up there, especially that quick.
Two other things to add to that. Were they saving like early 90s? Maybe it's new technology. They need to save battery power. Why wasn't the transmitter turned on already?
God knows. God
Turn it on.
knows.
Why? It's not moving. Why you're doing a sting operation? Maybe turn it on.
Yeah, yeah. There's no reason why it's just not on from the
Yeah.
start. Like, wait, did nobody turn this on? Dude, the bag's already fucking let. Oh god, it's like, yeah. I didn't even think about how dumb that is. It is legitimately, I think, the worst sting operation in movie history, without question.
And the other thing was when he realizes what's going on, and the hole cut underneath the trash can, the bin, is perfect enough for Keanu Reeves to fall through. And then he's like, "Turn around, you scumbag! I've met you before, you bomber. I know exactly what you look like from front and behind. You're not a woman." Oh wait, is that Annie? How the fuck did he not know it was
Yeah,
Annie?
they tried to do something dramatic with the lightning. What do you do? What do you do? And it turns out it's like, oh yeah, you're a 25-year-old super hot woman and not a 60-year-old dude limping about with
Apparently,
one hand.
you
It's
look like a 60-year-old dude and you got a flat ass from behind.
There's just no way. There's not enough darkness in the world for you to mistake Dennis Hopper for fucking Sandra Bullock. It's just not happening. It's not fucking happening. So yeah,
I questioned that
I'm glad we agree. Officially, the worst sting operation of all time.
I questioned it at first because when you first see it, there's like two corners that he's aiming at. So you just see a shadow and just around the corner. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm being a bit too mean for this. But then no, he's literally right behind her when he says turn around. There's no blockage. He knows that's fucking Sandra Bullock.
There is for a split second, there is enough there for you to be briefly blindsided by the fact that it might be her, it might be him rather than her. But then, like you say, you get that whole additional shot and he's standing right behind us. Like, there's no fucking way. And that's the big issue, right? This film is inherently dumb. And we mentioned that it's not just the jump. It's like, if you stop and think about it, when they're taking the corner, there's no way that big ass bus is staying above 50. But you let it go because, you know, it's fucking awesome. And like I said, for 60 minutes, this film is legitimately top tier.
Yeah.
But at the end, when you're suddenly on the train and you suddenly, like, the stuff with him and Dennis Hopper, it's fine, whatever. The death sequence just comes out of nowhere. It just keeps getting dumber and dumber from the moment they got off the train. Because I love all the stuff in the airport as well. Like, I totally forgot, like, the explosions in this movie are great. And it's another brilliant advert for physical effects. I forgot that for no apparent reason other than they could. They blow up a fucking plane in this movie.
Yeah, but what made me laugh so much about that is after the plane explodes, then the driver of the guy towing the plane of the little truck then decides to get out and run away.
Yeah, after it's blown up. But who gives a shit? Like I said, though, you're at that point in the movie where those little details, you're willing to let them slide because it just looks great. You're still on the bus. That high concept is still running at 1,000,000 miles per hour. But like I said, while I'm willing to forgive it its faults at the start of the film, and like I said, I actually thought the start was, because I was prepared for it to be like a second-rate Mission Impossible, because in the early 90s, they were all about lift shafts. You know, Mission Impossible worked so well because the whole team got killed, and it was this great cold opening. In this, it never quite reaches those levels, but it's a perfectly serviceable opening to what you know is coming the next 60 minutes, the stuff on the bus, which really is the meat and potatoes of the film. The finale, I was like, I'm pretty sure it was always bad. And I rewatched it, I'm like, it's bad. I like the fact that Keanu and Sandra Bullock get their moments, and you want them to kiss because there's all that chemistry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the showdown with Dennis Hopper does fall a bit flat. And
I quite like that, though, because Dennis Hopper is playing a retired bomb expert. He's not going to be physically demanding against Keanu.
You say that he jumped up on top of that train and
on
top of the train, which in itself is actually
he became super cop at that point.
Very Mission Impossible. Like I was saying about the intro,
being really similar to Mission Impossible.
It's the same thing.
I think Tom Cruise must have watched Speed early cut before they did that because the beginning and the end are both.
Because doesn't he end up fighting an old? Isn't it John Voight? He ends up fighting on top.
He's fighting John Voight on the train, and then Jean Reno dies in the helicopter, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think I see that's one of the other issues as well. Going back and rewatching it now is that it's hard not to do those comparisons. And make no mistake, the sequences on both the train at the end of the movie and the lift sequence at the start, they're just both better in Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible doesn't have those 60 minutes on the bus. It's a very different film. But in terms of an opening in a lift shaft and an ending on a train, it can't quite compete with Mission Impossible. It's just not shot as well. It's not as cool. It doesn't have Tom Cruise. You know, and I know you don't like Tom Cruise, but there's something special about him. But like I said, it's just a shame that the weakest part of this film, and it's not terrible. It's not terrible. It's just dumb.
So you get an hour.
The last thing you see is it's like the last 20 minutes, like
greatness.
Yeah.
Then it kind of feels a bit of a letdown. I totally get it from the terrible sting operation. I totally get it. You went back, right? Let's go back a little bit. You went on about Dennis Hopper. He had to have some time to really think out the plan for and he thought about it really well because he wanted them to lead him. He wanted to lead them to that house where Jeff Daniels died. That's why he put the gold watch on.
Genuinely shocking.
Yeah, but that's why they put the gold watch on it, because he knew it would lead them to him and things like that. He said it was a bit on the nose. What was more on the nose was the number of the bus. Did he do that on purpose? 25 equals 50?
I mean, that's kind of cool if he did. That's kind of cool. I mean, Hopper obviously is a details man. I mean, just to get back to your point, like, and it's not something we talked about, them killing off Jeff Daniels, who is super likable in this movie, especially the scene when they all get drunk and they have a party. I mean, I'll never forget this film for like showing the award ceremony on TV. I don't think an award ceremony for police officers has ever been shown on TV ever in the history of man, but it's needed for the plot. But everything with Jeff Daniels, absolutely fantastic, super charismatic. You know, we would like to have seen him in more action films in the 90s, but whatever. But I forgot what my point was now. I've got caught up on the whole Jeff Daniels thing. Oh, but yeah, the fact that he's like so caught up on the details, I want to believe that. But then I have this whole other criticism, like not criticism, issue with the film of trying to decide just how crazy Dennis Hopper is. Because there's like a long stretch of the film when they almost just trying to imply that he's just annoyed that because he wants money. You know, like the whole Hans Gruber thing in Die Hard. Like,
Yeah.
is he just like he's just willing to go this extra mile because he's super pissed off? Or even in what the fuck's it called? The one with Alcatraz, we mentioned earlier.
The Rock.
The Rock. The whole idea that, you know, these guys aren't bad guys. They've just been pushed to the edge and they're willing to go to extremes to get what they want. And to an extent, that's the case that they go for here. But in the opening, he stabs that guy in the ear, which is super dark. And then any doubt you have kind of fade away towards that crazy finale when they really do turn up the bonkers meter to 11, but it's only, for the last 20 minutes. For the rest of the film, he's relatively stable. And then the last 20 minutes, they're like, no, he's an absolute fucking psychopath.
Well, what I like is the news is hinting that he's a psycho, he's a madman, but everything about him is thought out. Yeah. Like he's planning everything. Like you said, it took him ages to plan the lift job. I still don't understand why it took him so long. I mean, again, I say this all the time. I'm not a bomb expert, but I know putting it in a microwave.
We should probably say that at the head of every podcast, just to be clear. Rob is not a bomb expert,
but I know putting it in a microwave doesn't set it off like it does in Point Blank. And in this one, he's made his bombs and then put it on the top and the bottom to trick everybody. And I get it. Fuck me, I've lost my point now with it. But I don't think he's like. The money is what he thinks is owed him for risking his life and losing his hand or the use of his hand in the job. So I like all that, and I like how he's thought out. And the way they changed it, then they pivoted to kill Jeff Daniels because originally Jeff Daniels wasn't going to be killed. And I wonder if they did that as well and kill him off because he was a bit pissed because he wanted to be the bad guy in this. And they took out a lot of his lines then. And from what I read as well, they actually gave a couple of lines then to the characters. So it was all changing for Jeff Daniels. So at the end of the day, probably we can't be asked with him anymore. Let's just fucking kill him off and get him gone.
Yeah, so maybe. Which always seems a shame because Jeff Daniels, despite whatever grievances he might have had, is still fantastic on screen. And I love that. It's a shame that we didn't get more Jeff and Keanu, basically, because they're fantastic in that opening sequence. And it's a shame that they cut away with it.
And that's what I think would have been great, having him then as the bad guy. You get more of the chemistry between them, and then you get
but it's almost
you get Keanu being betrayed, not portrayed, betrayed. I think it'd be
I get it, but it's weird because the film is not only split up into three parts. When I think of this film very clearly, I think of the lift shaft sequence at the start, then the bus sequence, and then the train sequence. And each part is basically Keanu having a relationship with one of the characters. There's obviously a little bit of crossover, but the opening sequence is all about Keanu and Jeff Daniels. Then when he gets on the bus, they hardly interact at all other than, I think, one phone call. And even I go as far as say he hardly has any interactions with Dennis Hopper. He has like one or two phone calls, but Dennis Hopper disappears for most of the best part of this movie. He's just gone. So the relationship then is between, and the chemistry is all about Keanu and Sandra Bullock. And then for the last sequence, I know he has the kiss and stuff with Sandra Bullock, but the ending really is then all about Keanu and Dennis Hopper. And again, the reason this works is because he has chemistry with all of them. And they never quite find a way to combine all three. The three parts and the three relationships almost feel quite separate, which is maybe a bit of an issue with this film. But like I said, I don't want to be too critical because it works with all of them. And again, especially with that, the best part of the film, the chunk of the film, those 60 minutes between Keanu and Sandra Bullock. And they're so good together that I found myself just assuming that they'd been in a bunch of movies, because it's almost like you think of Keanu, the next actor you think of is Sandra Bullock. They've only been in 2 movies together. It was just this and The Lake House. Yeah. And it's almost like Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. There was this idea in my head that they'd been in like 72 movies together. I think they were in like 3 maybe, but there was just this period when it was like Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan were a thing. And that's what I really hope is going to get over the line, because in recent interviews, I mean, not only did Keanu say, oh, he had a massive crush on Sandra Bullock when they were making this film. And you're like, fuck, man, I'm still holding that hope. I know he's happily married, but I think we're all still kind of hoping that he ends up with Sandra Bullock. But the fact that they both said recently that they not only want to work together again, but that they'd be willing to make a Speed 3. And if Jan de Bont, make no mistake, like he disappeared as a director after this film because of studio interference. If you had someone, even like a Netflix or an Apple, if they could, do a deal for like a cinematic push, but then it comes to a platform and say, yeah, if you come back, we will just fucking, I know he's like 80 years old right now, but you're just like, we will just carte blanche, just do, here's the budget, but we will not touch this. This is your movie. We'll get Keanu and fucking Sandra, get the whole gang back together. I'm like, I would totally be on board. Just don't set it on anything slow. Like basically just set it on a fucking plane. Easy. Set it on a fucking plane. Because I mean, Jan de Bont did Twister. He did Speed 2 as well, right?
Yeah, he did Speed 2. He did the House of the Haunted Hill, the Haunting, sorry, and then
The Haunting,
fucking Tomb Raider: Cradle of Life, wasn't it?
which was a bad movie. In fairness,
bad film to end on.
Yeah, it really was. Because like I said, he is better known as cinematography. He did Hunt for Red October, Die Hard, Black Rain, Basic Instinct. So he had like a long, illustrious history of like, cinematography for some really top tier films. But even though Cradle of Life was a bit of a stinker, it's like, well, what can you do? It's one of those movies, it's a franchise movie and stuff. It's like, Twister, Speed, even Speed 2, The Haunting, they're not bad movies. And Speed in particular is an absolute classic. And then for him to just disappear, it's like, I would love to see them all back together for a Speed 3. But as to whether we'll see it, I'm not sure about that.
My mind is drawn a blank. You literally just said it. What's the word you said between Keanu and Sandra Bullock that they have on screen?
Chemistry.
Chemistry. I fucking couldn't think of the word chemistry.
Do you know what's weird? I think I've said the word chemistry about 72 times in the last like 4 minutes.
And the reason being is because I wanted to bring something up, which is just a joke, and it's going to be pointless now. But once again, it's trying to find a thing to shoehorn it in, because all of a sudden you've just gone on like 900 tangents. And I'm like, I don't know how to bring this back.
Once I get going, don't stop me when I start cooking, buddy. You can't stop me when I start cooking.
The joke is so good in my head, I wanted to say this is going to be terrible now because I built it up again. Fantastic. The best chemistry is between Keanu and Ray, the guy with the gun. I'm not here for you. Whatever you did, I don't care right now.
I'm sure that you're sorry. Like it's like it feels like every movie, regardless of what kind of performance you're getting out of him, it feels like he has to have, especially in the 90s, like 5 minutes when he suddenly goes full Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, there's like no worries. I don't care what you did, bro. And it's just like he goes full surf, dude. You're like, dude, you need to turn that down a little bit. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned the fact that there's not great characters on the bus. That sequence, and we've made it clear, Keanu Reeves' performances, like they're in and of itself, they're both brilliant and terrible. That moment is just terrible.
Yeah,
it is
that's
just terrible.
I mean, the joke's probably not good, but I have to bring it up. Because you've got him on the one hand doing full surfer, and then you've got Ray who's going like, oh, this is my big moment. I was in Menace to Society before this. This is my big moment to go and do it. And he said, I didn't mean to do it. I don't like, what the fuck are you talking about? Nobody cares. Like, you should have just sat down, dude. I did like every time you see Keanu trying to get on the bus, though, the camera would point to Ray, and you just see his face, like his concern,
just looking shady.
Yeah,
like, oh, someone's gonna go off, bro. Someone's gonna go, and it does. In fairness,
it is American. You're talking as well about because you've just come back from America, and you talk about tipping, and there's no minimum wage, and everyone's poor Ortiz has been fired, hasn't he?
Yes, like 100%.
He didn't show up for his building job, so they were like, "Fuck it." There's plenty more guys waiting to do it. Like, fuck it. Ortiz is done. Yeah.
See, I'm giving shit to all those people on the show. I'm like, Ortiz, like he's actually okay. It's like it's okay. The bus, I was a bit unfair. Like the cast of characters on the bus is at least half decent. And the fact is, one of them is Sandra Bullock, who delivers. Is it fair to say one of the great star making performances in terms
she
of
does
an actor?
So well in it. Yeah, she's so.
But you know what I mean, like. Somebody who's just come seemingly, I know she'd been in a couple of like small part movies beforehand, but I think for most people, and certainly for me back in 1994, it just felt like she just dropped out of the sky as a ready-made movie star. And you think of like Christoph Waltz kind of did that with Inglourious Basterds, the dude you'd never seen, and you have that opening sequence. And don't get me wrong, she's not as good an actress as Christoph Waltz is in that, but it starts turning in their own unique way when you're like, where the fuck is this guy been hiding of? And even to an extent, I'd say like Jennifer Lawrence in The Hunger Games. I remember I watched the first one because it's similarities. I had no interest in the books, but it looked like, the kind of Western take on what's called
Battle Royale.
Battle Royale, thank you. And straight away, as soon as you watch the film, you're like, oh, she's a movie star. We mentioned it in, 1982 with 48 Hours. I know he had been on Saturday Night Live, but even Eddie Murphy to suddenly show up in a movie and being like, oh, there's no transition period. This guy is a fucking movie star. And that's what it was like with, it's not just her chemistry, there's that word again, with Keanu. She's just a movie star. Like the camera fucking adores her. And Jan de Bont clearly knows that. So yeah, I thought it was one of the great star-making performances of the decade.
I'll tell you who you do need to give shit to. Like you said, that you going a bit soft now on the bus passengers. The fucking woman who's told not to make any sudden moves but decides to put her handbag down.
Absolutely unforgivable.
Like, is that not a sudden move?
Although all I could think of with that sequence was, as great as he's supposed to be, and we're talking about how smart he's supposed to be ahead of the game. The whole video vision camera behind
I had that written down. Who's not noticing the massive brick?
Literally says on the side, video vision camera. It has no fucking business being there. As soon as you get on that bus, you're like, oh, perhaps I'll have a look around the fucking bomb bus. But no. And he gives him multiple tips about the whole Wildcat thing.
It literally should have had said on it, planted by the bomber. Like, it was ridiculous.
I think they tried to offset it by Dennis Hopper constantly giving Keanu shit for not being the sharpest tool in the box. And I think that is the idea. Like, he's heroic, he's stoic, but he's not very smart. And that's a perfect example. He's willing to go that extra mile, all that jazz. But without Harry, who, Dennis Hopper does keep saying, like, he's the brains of this operation. If Harry's on that bus, he checks behind there immediately and goes, what's up with this giant fucking camera? This is ridiculous.
Anyone getting on the... All right, I know he had to get on there. By terrible means. But anyone who was getting on that bus beforehand, they're not going to go, oh, when did you start putting security cameras in the bus?
Especially considering how, familiar they are with Sam. Like, Sam, the friendliest bus driver of all time. Like, he knows everyone's fucking name. Everyone's calling him by his first name. Like you said, that, if I was just getting on your average bus in Edinburgh or Cardiff, whatever, and you see a camera behind I probably wouldn't bring it up because most bus drivers aren't the most pleasant people in the world. Well, certainly the ones I've dealt with. But if I'm first name basis with this bus driver, and I see that big ass camera, and by the sounds of things, it's a bus all these people get on every single day. I'm like, dude, what the fuck's up with the camera?
Yeah.
But no, nobody brings it up. Keanu doesn't check for it. It's another one of those parts of the film where your brain just has to go, just let it go. Just let it go.
Speaking of recognizing things, did you notice the train driver? Now, he wasn't there too long because Dennis Hopper
he kills him pretty quick.
Pretty quick, yeah. But I couldn't believe him when I saw him.
Who is it?
So his name is Richard Schiff. Now, I'm saying that like, oh, I couldn't believe it when I saw him
because
it was Van Damme.
Richard Schiff.
Richard Schiff, who was Dr. Emil Hamilton in Man of Steel.
Okay, yeah.
He was Toby in The West Wing. Didn't watch The West Wing, but The West Wing was a big one.
Those guys kind of thing.
Yeah, he was in 7. I mean, I could give you a list of his 156 acting credits.
Yeah, like, he did look immediately familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. But that's the whole point about one of those guys. It's like, you've seen him in a million films, but you can't off the top of your head think of any of those fucking movies, which is...
Yeah, I mean, if this was 1995 or 1996, Ray would have been Danny Trejo. I'm pretty sure at that point. That's like, one of those guys. Like, just always you see him. I mean, he was fucking Richard Schiff was in Deep Impact. He was the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
That should be one we've done. Like, I haven't seen Deep Impact for years. I was a Deep Impact guy rather than an Armageddon guy. But I felt like certainly for people of our age group, you had to kind of pick one. Were you a Deep Impact guy or were you a fucking Armageddon guy?
We're gonna have to do a double feature.
Do both. You can't do one without the other. It's
because
it's like doing Volcano without doing Dante's Peak. It's like you just can't do it.
I was a Bruce guy, wasn't I? So I was definitely a...
Don't get me wrong. Like, I like elements of Armageddon. I'm not saying like I like Deep Impact completely at the expense of Armageddon. They're very, very different films. Armageddon is dumb as a bag of hammers. But like, if that Aerosmith song comes on, I can't help it. I'm immediately singing along. The whole speech at the end between him and Liv Tyler, it's so cheesy, but it fucking works. Like, in the moment, it totally works. Oh yeah, we totally have to both those. I'm actually surprised, especially Armageddon, because
we haven't
we could do a 4-hour podcast on Armageddon. Just talking about the cast is unfucking believable for that movie. Oh, we're gonna have to do that soon. But that's the thing. We'll have to come to an agreement. If one of us picks Armageddon, the other one has to pick.
It's gonna have to be a double feature.
That's what I mean. If we can't do one and then a month later, they have to be back to back. They have to be 100%.
We're gonna we're going to be giant asteroided out by the end of that. Fucking hell. Do you
I
know what
wouldn't
we'd have
mind
to
it.
do then?
I actually, like you mention it now, I would go as far as to say I actively want to rewatch both. Like
Do you know what we'd have to do
legitimately.
to cleanse our palate after those two?
What's that?
The Core.
Oh no, 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 fuck you. The Core is terrible. If those two are like the pinnacle of what I think of as modern-ish, I mean they're 90s movies now. That's pretty old. But certainly for our generation, like there was like, like again, there was Dante's Peak and stuff like that. They tried to bring it back with The Core. And I
Yeah.
like Hilary Swank. It's got a decent cast. That movie is ass. It is
Oh, it's terrible.
ass.
It's
It's
terrible.
really bad. There's no
What
way
can,
we're doing The Core on this podcast.
what can we do? Because they've been to space to save the world enough times. I don't know. Let's take it like into the middle of the world.
The concept is bad, but the movie is also bad. So yeah, it's a double header. Speaking
Yeah.
of bad, for the most part, especially if you watch this movie in HD or if you're lucky enough to see it in 4K, this movie has aged wonderfully. It looks
Oh, yes.
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
shot brilliantly. However, there are signs, and most of them are actually committed by Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. If there's anything more 90s than Sandra Bullock's look in this film, which is she gets away with it because she's so cute. And if anything, that 90s look has come back around. So it doesn't look as egregious, but it is very 90s. It's Keanu Reeves' jacket on that bus. It's like those spliffy jackets you used to get from like Splot Market back in the
Yeah.
day. That's very much a Cardiff thing, by the way.
Oh,
But that jacket is super 90s. It is, again, offset. Once he takes the jacket off and he looks cool as shit. And he's got that, like the classic G-Shock, the DW5600
yeah.
C1V, colloquially known as just the Speed G-Shock. After watching this film, I literally went out and bought it because I've got like I've had a red G-Shock for years, the exact same one but in red. And finally, the battery went. I've had it for like 11 years. I checked and they were like, oh, you can't just take it to a jeweler's. You've got to send it back to Casio because they have to reseal it.
Yeah.
It was £60 to get new batteries for what I spent at the time. It was an £80 G-Shock. Or I found on sale the Speed G-Shock for £50. So it's cheaper to buy a new G-Shock than it was to get new batteries for my 11-year-old G-Shock. So mentally, I've done, like Beth will just say, like, you've just talked yourself into buying another watch. That is exactly what's fucking happened. So I've basically given myself an excuse to buy the Keanu Reeves Speed G-Shock.
If you said the word chemistry 70 times, you've just said G-Shock about 90. Like if people were playing a drinking game, they're pissed right now.
Yeah, imagine that if there was like, oh, dude, you got to play the G-Shock fucking bingo card on the Hey Guys podcast. You will be fucked this week.
Do you know you said about the 90s look as well? I was ready to fight you because if you fucking go on about Keanu's hair, like I love, cool. Yeah, I know, but I was waiting for you to because all I could think about him looking 90s was the hair. But then,
really, I actually think the haircut is just like quite military. It's almost supposedly they were really upset about it because you got to think like this is coming off relatively recently when people were still thinking of Keanu, they were thinking of the long flowing locks, a la fucking Point Break and Bill and Ted and stuff like that. And when he showed up with this military cut, everyone was fucking furious. I don't think it was quite to the level of like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now and, Marlon Brando showing up 400-pound overweight. But everyone was very upset about this fucking haircut. But it actually looks really cool. And I think has a slightly timeless look. I think his whole outfit is timeless, except for that fucking jacket. Whereas, Annie, she's just 90s top to bottom. She looks like she's dressed like fucking Fiona Apple in a music video. It's ridiculous. But
the one thing I want to mention before we move on is when he's talking to Harry and he's like, oh, can you see the bomb? Well, no, I can't get under the bus right now. And then Sam risks more pain and, like not helping himself by going, there's an access panel under the floor. So you're expecting him to move like a carpet or anything. No. He's on top of the access panel. But you can clearly see it's an access panel. So Keanu Reeves is like, oh, no, I can't get under the bus. Maybe, wait, what's this thing I'm lying on? And not just that then. There's another one down the end of the bus that turns into a sled. And then when Jack and Annie are skidding, it grew wheels all of a sudden.
It absolutely grew. I mean, they die in that situation for sure. But again, you're like Keanu and Sandra, like, well, they have to survive. So if it means we're adding magic wheels to this magic access panel, which I'm pretty sure no fucking bus has, certainly doesn't have two of the cunts. It's just weird because rewatching the film, for those 60 minutes, there's a lot of dumb stuff, but I found myself, like, I'm only writing this down because I'm doing a podcast. I forgive everything everything. But the ending, like every single dumb thing annoyed me in the last 20 minutes of this film. But for 60 minutes, I'm like, I couldn't give a fuck. This film is dope. Last 20 minutes, I'm like, this just keeps getting dumber. I'm like, I actually think the last 60 minutes were dumb as well. I just didn't care.
I would forget about it all if I wasn't writing it down for this podcast.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
like the magic pipe that was clearly the right size to wedge between the accelerator and the chair. Like they didn't even like perfect size. He didn't have to do anything with it. It was absolutely the right. Like they fucking measured it.
Yeah, this film, like you said, if you stop and think, this film actually from minute one until whatever it is, 110 minutes. Actually, I think it's about 110 minutes, which doesn't feel like that. This film has, it clips along. Unsurprisingly, there's no wasted air in this movie. But if you do stop and think about it for a second, which this movie doesn't really give you a chance to do the first couple of times you're watching it, it's just so you're constantly propelled forward, both narratively and in terms of the action. You don't stop and think about the fact that none of it makes sense. But when 30 years later, and this movie is 30 years old, which is maybe one of my hates, a lot of it is just dumb as fuck. But like I said, when it's this good, we'll allow it, so it's fine. Should we move on to favorite scene?
Yeah, for me, mate, it's Glenn Plummer as the Jaguar on it. That whole getting onto the bus thing with the Jaguar.
That's a cool show because it's actually like a low key, like cool stunt when he jumps onto the bus, and it actually adds a bit of probably much needed levity at that point.
Yeah, well, you've got it all in there, haven't you? You've got the chase scene that you thought you were going to get when he jumped his car over that magic ramp at the beginning of it. So you got this car chase scene. The fucking Jaguar is lovely.
Yeah, it is.
You've Glenn Plummer, you want more of him. Maybe not then. Obviously, Brandon Lee shows up in Speed 2 as speedboat owner, but it is where it is.
Yeah, well, that's Speed 2 for you.
Yeah, I think it's great when he gets on the bus and then because you've got like Sam reads that there's bomb on bus thing, so he goes to stop it, and then Keanu notices, he's like, no, slow down, speed, like everything. You've got to like, because there's no cell phones are rare in 1994, so it's not like you can ring anyone on the bus. He's already said cleverly, like Howard said, well, the radio's fucked, so you can't contact them. So everything about it is so good, and
it's just a cool way to set up, because he's getting on the bus because you've seen the poster and this needs to happen. But why not have an awesome sequence leading up to getting on the bus? And it's like that's exactly what it is. So even though mine isn't that, I mean, mine is, despite the fact that, as we've already mentioned just literally a moment ago, that this film is pretty dumb when you stop and think about it. The bus jump being one of the prime examples. I don't care. It's fucking awesome. It has all the tension, the build up to it. Like you said, when you get the stuff with Captain McMahon where he's on the truck, he's like, "There's no fucking bridge. How is everybody on the same bridge?" And then there's no bridge, and then you get like the not slow build up to it, speedy build up, whatever you want to say. I love that sequence, despite that fact that it doesn't make any sense. I think it perfectly sums up this movie. So that's still my favorite scene.
Cool.
Loves and hates. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves, I think is great. I'll give you Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock as well with their chemistry. Now I know the word chemistry. I think they're great.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
I love Howard right up until the end when he becomes stupid. I think Howard is a great villain because he's not overpowering. You know what I mean? He's not intimidating or anything like that. He's just a dude who
when he does it. Dennis Hopper does Unhinged very well, and he walks it, I think, I would argue, right up to the line. Like he is giving a big performance, even in his quieter moments, just because he's Dennis Hopper, and he's a massive screen presence. Doesn't matter what he's doing. He's a big ass screen presence. And he is, to an extent, chewing the scenery, but he always keeps it just the right line of getting silly, or like you said, maybe nudges over just towards the end of the film, but for the most part, he's playing just the right side of the line, I think.
And 90% of the bus scenes, I think 90% of the scenes on the bus, the tension, the drama, everything like that. When he's talking to Harry via Alan Ruck, and Alan Ruck is talking, and it's like, oh fuck me, oh darn, like I think that is all great. So I got to go with 90% of the bus scenes as my third.
Fair enough. Number one, unsurprisingly, Keanu and Sandra, like I said, individually great, but together absolute gold. You can say the same as I mentioned earlier about Keanu and Daniels on screen as well. Number two, the premise is just elite. It's up there with Die Hard and The Raid. Just, the bus that couldn't slow down, the classic Simpsons quote. It's just a great premise. Very simple, very high concept. Does that make sense? Can it be both simple and high concept? I think it can. Yeah. Because like high concept, like Die Hard, you're just in a building, but it's fucking dope. And number three, just wonderfully shot. You know, I mentioned earlier Jan de Bont's history as a cinematographer. This is a great looking movie, great camera work, it's constantly in motion. This is Jan de Bont, I think, at his best. This is his best work. I know, I like Twister, I like some of the other films, but when I think of Jan de Bont, I still think of this movie primarily. And it's the reason why, I think it's important that if you do a third film, it's not just Keanu and Sandra. Those two are the most important, but a big part of this movie is Jan de Bont's direction. So hopefully he'll come back for the third film as well. Hates?
So the first one is probably going to be more about me than about the film, because they're not really thinking about the next steps in regards of, so there's a few for my number one hate. Like the crane to slow the bridge down. Why is there a crane up there? The random jump of the car, the random jump of the bus with the incline. They didn't really think how to build up the action sequence or how to get us to the action sequence. They just gave us the action sequence and just said, don't overthink it. So
your issue is with some of the movie logic, basically.
Yeah. And I'm probably overthinking the movie logic. So the hate is probably more towards me than it is the film.
No, I think that's fair enough. And as we mentioned, like, you probably didn't notice those things the first time you watched this movie. But when you're watching it for the second, third, fourth, fifth time, you're watching it specifically for a podcast where you are to an extent picking it apart. That's when you really start going, wait a minute, what about this, and that? And you just can't help but picking those up. The film, I think, is good enough that you probably didn't. I would say most of us didn't notice the first time. Those do seem like the kind of things you would pick up on first time specifically, because that's the way your brain works. But yeah, I totally get it. Movie logic, you just kind of have to go with it because it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. My second one then, again, I probably could say everything in the final third or the last 20 minutes, as we've already said, it's why is Sandra Bullock there? Why
that bit really annoyed me as much as the train. I thought it was going to be the train stuff which annoyed me the most. The fact that it kind of comes out of the ground and they end up parking in front of the Man's Chinese Theater, all that stuff is actually pretty cool. It's the sting operation before is just so dumb that I just never I couldn't quite get over it, and it almost ruined what is an okay finale otherwise.
Why is Sandra Bullock there? Why did they not turn on the tracker? Why aren't like the snipers are basically just they need red neon signs to say here I am, because you can clearly see them.
I honestly, this is like the fucking remember the bomb in the microwave in Grosse Pointe Blank, where I never noticed the fact that there was a countdown, but it has nothing to do with the bomb. It doesn't make any sense. I feel the same way about the tracker. I did not notice the tracker until you brought it up, and now I'm like, if I ever watch this again, I can't unsee that. It's so dumb now that you've mentioned it. That's almost unconscionable. Like, why wouldn't it just be on? It makes no sense. And it's one of those ones, it got past me. I didn't think twice about it when I was watching the movie for the fucking umpteenth time. But now that you've said it, I'm like, that might be the dumbest fucking thing in the whole film.
Yeah.
Other than bringing Annie to the site. That's easily the dumbest thing.
I might have another dumb thing for you, because my third one is the fact that you rehashed pretty much one of the biggest things twice. It's unfinished. The track's unfinished. The fucking bridge is unfinished. We're gonna jump the bus. We basically jump the bridge. Like it's. Yeah. I had it written down. Is anything in LA finished?
It is almost like they must have had that conversation to be like, are we doing this again? We're doing the whole track's not finished again. Like we've done that in this movie, not like the last movie. In this fucking movie, like the two biggest, arguably. The two biggest set pieces, or two of the three, blowing up the plane is pretty massive. But two of the biggest set pieces in this movie are ostensibly the same sequence on different vehicles, which is insane. Do you
know why the plane blew up? Because the hangar wasn't finished.
The hangar wasn't finished. Like otherwise, it would have been in there. Absolute shocker. Yeah. Number one for me, Keanu's jacket. He's got an absolutely elite, timeless look. Other than that god awful jacket. As we've already mentioned, the ending, I've got down here, the ending is arguably the weakest part of the movie. I think the more we've discussed it, the ending is undisputed. Like it's definitely the worst part of this movie. Yeah. And number three, I know you're a fan, but it led to Speed 2. And yeah, the ending's pretty dumb, but those are my hates.
You're not allowed, I keep telling you this, you're not allowed to add one of your hates as it gave us this. Like
I know. That's
my
why
third hate is when I was watching this film, I stubbed my toe. I fucking hate that.
Okay,
You're not
okay. Well,
allowed to
I'll
do
put
that.
down like the passengers on. I did have down the passengers on the bus are pretty whatever, but I talked myself out of that during the
I'll
podcast.
just say
That's
the
the problem.
tracker. I've upset you now. Say the
Well,
tracker.
yeah, if I'd known that before, like it is the tracker now, but that would be disingenuous because I didn't have that in my notes. So if you're having the rule about like I can't mention stuff that it leads to, like the fact that it leads to speed 2, I will change it to the tracker because the tracker is super upsetting. That and Annie, it all blends into the fact that the ending's not great, basically.
Yeah.
But any alternative titles beyond the bus that couldn't slow down? And what was the other one you said in the intro?
So when Graham Yost wrote it,
Mhm.
the screenplay, it was minimum speed.
So bad. That's almost
terrible.
as bad as Speed 2.
Yeah. I questioned myself when I looked at the alternate titles, but I have checked it. No, minimum speed
That
was
is
what it was.
so dumb. I'm glad
Yeah.
somebody at least stepped in and went, you do realize minimum speed sounds really fucking slow, right? The complete opposite. If anything, I would go as far as say the bus that couldn't slow down is without question and quite literally a much better title than
Yeah.
Minimum Speed. And also minimum speed sounds like a Steven Seagal movie. It just does.
Well, that leads us right into our first one, Argentina, maximum speed.
Yeah, all of these are going to sound like fucking Jason Statham movies if you're making them now, like straight to DVD stuff.
China making it sound like one of these John Travolta films that he's got at the moment. The ones that are coming out for John Travolta are ridiculous. Speed of Life and Death.
Ah, that's a rough one. That's a rough one.
Czech Republic, Dangerous Speed.
Yeah, they've all got a similar vibe. Straight to DVD is the vibe.
I think Finland too got this confused with Speed 2. Speed, Aboard Death.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like Speed 2.
Yeah. Hungary, Unbridled.
That's got to be a translation issue.
Yeah. Latvia, Velocity.
Yeah, sounds like a late 90s Christian Slater film. That's what that specifically. I don't know why that specifically sounded like that. Maybe because you just said John Travolta and I've got Broken Arrow in my head, but that's where I've gone.
Spain, Speed, Maximum Power.
It's just not needed, is it? Like Speed's just a dope title.
Taiwan, Defend the War Police.
Well, they've missed the boat on that one. Jesus Christ.
What else have we? Turkey, Speed Trap.
No, that's not right at all. Because again, that inherently sounds like you should be going slower.
Yeah, I got to question the translation on some of these, as I've said before. Uzbekistan, Thesis.
Oh yeah, that has to be a translation thing. That's just one of those things. You run it through Google Translate, and it for some reason Google Translate, well, maybe for obvious reasons, it hasn't caught up on its Uzbek recently, and you end up with fucking Thesis.
I mean, is that the first time we've ever had Uzbekistan?
I think it might be.
Yeah, and they've come up with Thesis apparently.
Thesis, crazy.
Yep.
That all of them?
That's it, mate. That's it.
Any facts? I know you kind of hinted at a few earlier, but
So Keanu Reeves breaking the glass on the bus door in the beginning of the bus chase was an accident, but director Jan de Bont liked its effect, and it was left in the final cut. So Keanu Reeves just going beast mode and just fucking took out a point.
That's the Jan de Bont film. You just got carte blanche.
The scene in which Annie takes the chewing gum out of her mouth and pretends to put it on a seat in order to have an excuse to change seats and move.
Why is that scene so charming? The way she delivers that line. I got gum on my seat. Gum. Yeah. For some reason, I always remember her line delivery for that sequence in particular. I don't know why, but it's just in my head.
Well, there you go. Do you know why? Improvised by Bullock. Just on the spot.
There we go. There we go. Maybe that's why she sounded quite weird. But yeah, it's a memorable line. Memorable line reading, more specifically.
Or non-reading.
Or non-reading. Yeah. Because she, of course, improvised it.
Sandra Bullock actually learned to drive a bus for the film, passing a test on her first attempt.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
she is believable driving the bus, so I'll give her that.
The bus jump scene was done twice, as I already said. The bus landed too smoothly the first time, so the bridge was actually there, but erased digitally. Well, I didn't think they took the bridge away, to be fair.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves and Jeff Daniels trained with real SWAT personnel to perfect their movements.
Keanu's always been top of that. There's all these videos now with him and John Wick and doing those training videos. He always just looks at business.
He did, like he does now. But the way he was holding that MP5 submachine gun thing, like just way out in front of him, just felt really.
I'll always believe in Keanu because I always think he gets the physical stuff right. Like he always looks legit with a gun. Whenever he's in a sports movie, he looks like a sports star. Like he's obviously been in Point Break and he was in the Replacements. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was awesome. You just bought him as a quarterback. And obviously the Matrix with the the kung fu and all the other jazz, the martial arts. Whenever he's doing anything physical, I'm like, yeah, I buy it because Keanu he's just good at it. And I always just assume he's super committed, almost trying to make up for the fact that he perhaps knows he's not the greatest actor in the world, perhaps.
I mean, I'll go with that as well. Like I said, I'm not a bomb maker and I'm not an expert in SWAT tactics.
You're not. Yeah. That's another one. We'll put that in the write up of the when we put this online.
Rennie Harlin and Quentin Tarantino were offered the chance to direct but turned it down. Tarantino later named the film as one of his 20 favorite films since '92.
This would be a massively, massively different film. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Quentin Tarantino and I love all of his films. I'm glad he didn't direct this. It'd be a good movie. But it wouldn't be anywhere. It wouldn't be anything like what we got. There'd be so much more dialogue, blah blah blah. I'm so glad that Jan de Bont directed this movie.
Speaking of, Jan de Bont insisted that Keanu Reeves get a sensible haircut, as would befit a hardworking cop. 20th Century Fox executives were horrified when they saw the buzz cut he adopted for the film, going so far as to threaten postponing the film so he could grow his hair back.
No, just let it be. Let it be. He looks cool as shit in this film. Jan de Bont was right. And don't get me wrong, I love Keanu with the long hair. Fuck me. Has he ever been? You can see why, because, and we mentioned it and I mean this from a heterosexual viewpoint, but has any man ever been more dreamy than fucking Keanu Reeves in Point Break? Like, there's some of the pictures, like, Jesus Christ, that's got to be one of the most beautiful men who's ever lived. And part of it is the Barnett. If he looks that beautiful, I'm not sure if it works in this film. Like, I think they wanted him to be, like, you can't hide the handsomeness. He was just a super handsome dude. But you want him to look a bit more tough. And I think the haircut did the trick.
I got to go with Henry Cavill in Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
I've said this to my wife before. I was like, he's almost like ludicrously handsome. Like, very we're talking from a purely, whether you're a guy, you're a girl, when you can look at someone and from an objective viewpoint, you're like, that is just a beautiful person. It goes beyond sexual orientation. You're just like, my God, it looks like somebody fucking drew that person. Like, they're just so beautiful. And it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, once you get to that like elite level, it goes beyond preferences and it's just someone you can just appreciate. And Henry Cavill at his best, you're like, God damn, that has to be one of the most handsome dudes that's ever lived.
I got called out by Dave's wife, Rachel. Apparently, he's not handsome.
Yeah, but she fucking fancies Vin. She prefers Vin Diesel to Henry Cavill. Like, she just doesn't have an opinion. Like, and again, that comes down to sexual preference, because those things can like muddy the waters. If you're talking about women, you can have like certain preferences for like a certain type, and you'd be like, well, she's not objectively the most beautiful woman in the world, but for some reason she does something for you. But especially if you're looking at dudes and you're heterosexual, you're looking at it from a more objective level, and from an objective level, Vin Diesel, handsome enough dude in his own weird way, does not belong in the same stratosphere as fucking Henry Cavill or Keanu Reeves in 1994. That's just a fact. Here's us again. How many times have we ranked the super hunks on this fucking podcast? Ridiculous.
So I'll finish with two more, and then both bus related. So a special bus was used for the bus.
Sorry, the only important thing is at this point, it's not dude related. I've definitely gone far enough down that road, so I'm glad we're on to buses now.
A special bus was used for the bus jump. This bus was modified so that it could reach a speed of 70 miles per hour, and it was equipped with powerful shock absorbers. The driver's seat was moved back 15 feet so that if something went wrong, the driver wasn't ejected from the bus. The seat itself was a suspension mechanism between the ceiling and the bus floor to prevent the driver from suffering spinal compression on impact. So basically, the driver was in a bungee seat in the middle of the bus.
I tell you what, though, if you've ever sat, like, to bring it back to movies, when I went to America, one of the places I went to Wisconsin, and specifically, went to Madison, but we also went to Milwaukee. And in Milwaukee, they've got the Harley Davidson museum there, which is amazing. And one of the bikes is Arnold Schwarzenegger's bike from Terminator 2. And obviously, that famously does one of those big jumps, and it lands. And of course, as we mentioned, it's one of those where you can see, they've digitally changed it since, but certainly back in the day, you see it wasn't Arnie. I actually think for something like that bike, those things could have worked, because towards the end of the museum, there are a few Harley Davidsons which you can just sit on, and the classic ones, the V twin engines, when you, even though there's loads of different Harley Davidsons, those classic ones you think of, and a la Terminator 2, they've got these really super springy seats, and you almost think it's like you could be dropped off a fucking mountain, and the one thing that would survive is your ass, because those seats are super comfortable. But on a bus, it's not. It's just not happening. So, that bus would have had to be changed in a million ways. Because as we said, even if it survived the jump in terms of if theoretically it made the jump, it wouldn't have survived the jump because the bus would have just been in fucking bits if it was a real one. So,
Well, there you go. Sorry, I've actually got two more which are bus related anyway, so that's fine.
cool.
Because you just said that then. So for the bus jump sequence, a ramp was built. The bus was started from about a mile back and accelerated towards the ramp. By the time it hit the ramp, it had reached a speed of 61 miles per hour. It traveled 109 feet, and its front wheels reached an altitude of 20 feet off the ground, which was
Awesome.
higher than anyone had anticipated.
So
Because of
cool.
this, the cameras were not placed correctly, and the top front part of the bus goes out of the frame when the bus reaches the maximum point of the jump. That's why they had to
See,
refilm
I
it
love it
because
in movies
the
when
stunt guy was like he was an overachiever. Like, you know
yeah,
what
well,
I can
they're
do?
the best ones. It was like, you think of the one that immediately jumps out to me, no pun intended, is Casino Royale when they went to like, oh, we're going to flip the car. And they ended up breaking the world record by accident. It was like, oh, we're just going to flip the Aston Martin. And it flipped over 12 times. And suddenly someone was like, dude, does someone want to check the record books? I think we may have just flipped the car the most times ever. I think Fall Guy may have beaten it recently, which is a bit of a shame because that film is whatever. But yeah, I love the idea of stunt guys just totally overachieving, just sending. It's like, can we get this bus over the bridge? I'll get this bus over the bridge. No
Like they
fucking
fit.
problems.
It's like they fit it with Nos and just went. You know what? Let's
Yeah, yeah.
fucking go. And lastly, then 10 buses were used in the making of the film. Each one had two steering wheels, one for Sandra Bullock, the other for the stunt driver, which is more often than not on the roof of the bus. Sandra
Oh,
Bullock
cool.
comes along going, you know what? I've just passed my bus driving test. I can drive your bus. No, no, it's all right. We got Jimmy on the roof. He's going to do it for you.
Probably for the best, to be honest, whether you've just passed your test or not. Jesus Christ. Hug to the future. So this is where we ask the question: remake, sequels, let it die or leave well alone. I think I would have said a couple of months ago if we'd done this was absolutely leave well alone. Still looks great, brilliant premise, all that jazz. But considering recent interviews with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock talking about doing another movie together, hinting towards the idea that they might be willing to make a Speed 3. If you can get the whole gang together, and when I say the whole gang, as I mentioned earlier, Keanu, Sandra Bullock, and Jan de Bons, I am absolutely on board for Speed 3, as long as it's not set on a, as long as they have a good idea, which really is just, set on a plane. But I would happily watch Speed 3, but it has to have those three specific parts.
I kind of want to see a remake. I'd like to see what they
Really?
do with. Yeah, I love this film, and I've always said before, a remake is never going to take anything away um,
No, I just think
from
it's
the original.
unnecessary
No, no,
because
I,
I
I
think
get
it's
that. I get that, but we've seen enough of these Keanu Reeves ones. Now. I'd like to see if they can do something with somebody else. I'd like to see a remake. I think the premise is good enough that you could do it again now. So
I just don't know. Like one, I think this film still looks fantastic, and I'm like, who do I want to see instead of Keanu and Sandra Bullock on that bus? And I'm struggling. Who do I want to see instead of Dennis Hopper? There are a couple of options, but again, he's fucking awesome. Is there somebody I would pick instead of Jeff Daniels? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't think it'd be the most egregious thing in the world, but I'm not screaming out for a remake. That's for sure.
I get that. But my problem is, as has always been, 20 or as you've said, 30 years later for sequels coming back just never works for me. They've never worked. When you do these late sequels, they don't work. And
Wow.
I challenge
Wow.
you to pick one that does.
Top Gun Maverick, 100%.
Yeah, it doesn't fucking work. Uh,
I mean,
and
right,
I
just to be
literally
clear,
said, hang
no,
on, hang on, hang on. I said
that's
doesn't work
just you.
for me.
Yeah,
I
okay,
said
that doesn't
doesn't
work
work
for
for
you.
me.
But I mean, that was objectively a fantastic sequel, which made $1 bajillion. So by everyone else's metrics, it 100% worked.
And everyone else is a fucking idiot. I don't get it, but
They're
it is
really
where it
not.
is.
Yeah, I do honestly, as a fan of cinema, I do not know how you could go to watch Top Gun Maverick at the cinema and not on at least some level appreciate it. Like I literally
On some
can't get my
level,
head around it. It's shot so wonderfully. It sounds like the end of the world. I know you hate Tom Cruise, which
that's the
again,
problem. His
I really struggle
shit-eating
with.
grin is all over that fucking film, and
Tom
it's
Cruise
terrible.
is Tom Cruise
Not a
is so
fan.
good. I
But
know, I know, I know. We're always gonna have that disagreement, the Tom Cruise
and
thing.
this is why,
It,
and I don't think not legacy sequels. I don't think sequels or late sequels work for me.
No, for
They
the
don't.
most part,
Yeah.
there aren't that many legacy sequels that work. I mean, I'd actually make an argument for, I know it didn't do well at the box office. I actually thought Blade Runner 2049 was really good. Again, I know you're not a big fan. I thought it
Yeah.
was fantastic. Some people are making an argument, I suppose, for The Force Awakens, but we know where that has led subsequently. And again, you're not a Star Wars guy. So, yeah, from your perspective, I get it.
I would call Blade Runner 2049 more of a legacy sequel than an actual sequel.
Yeah, no, but it is,
Yeah.
it's got, Harrison Ford comes back. It is a legacy sequel, but I think legacy sequel is basically just any, I don't know what the specific time cutoff is, but if your sequel is coming, like Axel F is a legacy sequel
Yeah.
because
Well,
it
for
just came
me,
so far behind.
I don't know that for me, I see legacy sequel as you're moving it on, but you're bringing that character back
I
as a
know what you mean.
supporting role. So you brought Decker back as a supporting role, for that makes it
But
legacy.
you're
Whereas
telling a
Axel F,
different story in that
yeah,
world. Well, I actually agree with you. Like we could like argue about the semantics here, but if we're using that specific example, you know, Axel F is like what, nearly 30, well, it is 30 years after the third movie, but it just feels like a sequel. And it's more importantly, it's treated like a sequel.
and
It
I
just feels
totally
like
agree.
another, yeah.
I challenge you to name one that wasn't fucking Top Gun, and you've done it because I like Axel F, and
It
that is
was
a
okay.
sequel, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. It basically wiped the taste of the third one out of your mouth.
It did. It did. It felt like it was much more closely aligned, both in terms of quality and tone, to the first two movies. The only problem is you naturally compare it to the first two movies, and it's not as good as those. It's a really fun 3-star movie, whereas for Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 are somewhere between 4 and 5. They're fantastic. And, it's the difference. You're talking about the director. Tony Scott is, they didn't have, for obvious reasons, Tony Scott wasn't back to direct the fourth film. It's a perfectly decent sequel. And I think you are right. I don't think that is a legacy sequel, but despite the run of time, but I don't know. But then I start making the argument, then it's like, does that mean Top Gun is just a sequel? Anyway, we'll go
I
down that
think it
rabbit
is
hole another
just.
day.
Who knew that me saying I'd want to see a remake of Speed would take us off the fucking
Yeah, we're just
track?
going to stretch this podcast into a fucking 4-hour podcast about the semantics of legacy sequels. Make a change. I think it's probably going to be the same answer for both of us. Work on that finale.
Yeah.
I would just tidy up the end of this film, which, like we've made clear, isn't terrible. It's just so much weaker than the rest of the film.
You've got the okay opening that gives you the characters. You
Yeah.
then have that fantastic middle. It's all about the bus and everything like that. And the whole premise of this is the bomb on the bus. It's all about the bus. The ending needs to be something to do with the bus. Then you take it 20 minutes to a fucking train, which could have been a sequel. So as you've rightly said earlier on. So yeah, for me as well, tighten up that ending, or at least hit on the fucking tracker.
Turn on the tracker at the very least, yeah. In terms of video games, there was actually a tiny fan-made game released in 2015 called Terminus, which looks kind of fun. And you control the bus with the left stick and Keanu with the right stick. It's like a split screen the whole time. It's actually quite clever. It's one of those game jam games, so I'm not even sure if it's readily available anymore. But like the racing part of it looks like, remember Spy Hunter? They're actually going to turn that into a movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but it just disappeared.
Threatening that for ages. I'd rather see that than
nobody needs
fucking...
a spy. Nobody needs a fucking Spy Hunter film in the same way we didn't need a Rampage movie, if truth be told. I would love Rampage.
I'd rather him spend his time and do that than piss on my fucking Big Trouble in Little China because he's still trying to be Jack Burton.
Oh, I hope he doesn't do that. I really hope he doesn't do that. I just do something interesting. Just do something left field. Anyway, moving on. If I was going to make a game now, I'd just simplify the whole premise down to a Sega style arcade game, a la Outrun, only with a bus instead of a Ferrari and Sandra instead of a random blonde. Or maybe, do you remember Chase HQ from back in the day, where you were driving a police car and you could at the same time you could like shoot the gun out the top?
We did it for the Lethal Weapon. We did.
Oh yeah, of course. So something along those lines. Basically, like the film itself, I want it to be total popcorn. I don't need story. I just want to be driving the bus, a bit of action included. So, and I love Sega, so I just have a 90s style Sega arcade game.
I was thinking Sleeping Dragons.
Yeah, well, any excuse for us to bring up Sleeping Dragons because we are the great celebrators of one of the most underrated open world video games of the last 15, 20 years. And it had amazing DLC as well. I hardly ever played DLC. The DLC for Sleeping Dragons was fucking dope.
It's open world. You can stretch it past the bus if you want to with the character where you're just trying to find Howard Payne and stuff as you planting bombs all over this fucking world. So
yeah, it certainly starts sounding a little bit like Die with a Vengeance, but yeah, I
like your idea. I do like your idea, but I'll go something different and say Sleeping Dragons. But I say you won on this one. Make it an arcade Sega game.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I really just want a sequel to Sleeping Dragons. It is Sleeping Dragons, isn't it? It was the Hong Kong one, yeah.
Yeah, was this because I've just tried googling, I couldn't find.
I don't think it is Sleeping Dragons. I know exactly what you meant, but now I can't get Sleeping Dragons out of my head. It was an unofficial sequel to like True Crime LA, and that's not even right either. I'm fucking that name up. You have to look it up while I keep talking.
I'm trying.
All right, so ratings and recommendations. I'll move on first. very easy. Well, not very easy because I was tiptoeing around 5 because when this movie's at its best, I was like, this film's a fucking bomb. But due to the aforementioned issues, I'm going to stick with 4. But in terms of recommendations, it's still super easy. This movie still looks great. The actors are still fantastic. The action absolutely holds up. So 4 and a solid yes. And if you are interested, it's currently on Disney Plus. So there we go. You're still looking up that video game, aren't you?
Yeah, I can't find it at all.
Will you give your rating and I'll find it.
For me, it's a 4 as well. There's only a couple of things that drop it, mainly the ending, as we've said. And yeah, it's a highly recommendable film. That's a word, and I'm sticking with it because it's so good. It's such a good ride, and I would
Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping Dogs, not dragons. That's why I couldn't fucking find it.
Well, no, but I get it. Like dragons is set in Hong Kong. That totally makes sense. But yeah, it was Sleeping Dogs.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I would do a Sleeping Dogs one, but I'll stick with yours. But I would recommend it as well. I think it's great. I think it's a good film. And I got a point as well. I'd say, well, while you're on the speed track, why don't you just watch a bit of Speed 2 as well?
Oh, definitely don't watch that. Don't ruin your day with that. Jesus Christ, do I have one for next week? Yes, I do have one for next week because I actually thought this was your podcast. I made a whole mess of it at the start. I'm still suffering from jet lag. But yes, next week is my choice. We have been tiptoeing around this for a while. Very different movie. The year is 1981.
Oh, fucking hell.
Early doors.
Yeah, 1981.
The director might well give it away, but I'm going to go for it. The director is Terry Gilliam.
Oh, Time Bandits.
Time Bandits, indeed.
Nice.
The reason this is in my head, we've been tiptoeing around this film for ages, and there's a new TV show based on
the TV show is out,
movie.
yeah.
So it's like, why not? If ever we're going to go back and rewatch this movie, one of the stranger movies of the early 80s, a movie which I inexplicably grew up with and watched so many times when I was younger. And then, like you watch it again as an adult and you're like, this film is fucking bananas. I was just like accustomed to it as a kid because it's just like, yeah, I knew it was weird, but it was just like a film that was always on Channel 4. It was one of the first movies I really remember always being on Channel 4 when I was younger. It just Time Bandits felt like it was on every week. I'd watched it a million times. I've not seen it for a long time. Believe me, I know it's still mental. I'll be very interested to see just how mental it is. It has one of the all-time bonkers endings of any movie ever.
Well, I mean, I can't wait to see it because I've never seen it.
Oh, dude, I mean, if you're not aware of the big cameo, it comes out of nowhere. That's crazy. And that cameo has another cameo with the same character at the ending, which, again, makes no sense. But you watch it like, that's cool. So I'm not going to say anything about it. But
I've been looking forward to it for a while. We've been talking about it. We always somehow manage to bring it up. Like you said, we tiptoe around it for all the time. And I know I haven't watched it. And I keep thinking maybe I should watch it, but no, I'll wait for this podcast. And every time I look to see if it's ready for us, it's always you got to buy it. So I haven't picked it, but randomly it's just popped up to stream on Channel 4. So
yeah. Well, that was as I said, Channel 4 was always I thought of as being the home of Time Bandits, and I guess because of the TV show, I've obviously noticed it, and I was like, "Fuck, it's there. This is the time to watch it." If anyone's interested, I have the podcast. I mean, if you've never seen it, you should absolutely watch it. It's something of a classic. And if you have seen it before, just go back and remember how fucking bananas this movie is. But yeah, it's almost surprising, maybe not as much as Speed, especially as you hadn't seen it perhaps, that we could have got like 176, whatever it is, 75 episodes into this podcast. And you're like, how the hell are we only doing Speed now? Personally, I could almost say the same about Time Bandits because this was one of like the big movies of my youth, like one of those movies where I must have seen like 20 times when I was younger. But yeah, some great moments, but a real strange one for sure.
I think the same about a lot of films, mine. Like we already mentioned Armageddon. How have we not done Armageddon yet?
That is a bit surprising, yeah.
How have we not done Lethal Weapon 2? We did Lethal Weapon the first year. We haven't done Lethal Weapon 2.
And a lot of people actually prefer Lethal Weapon 2, which is, again, quite surprising. So, yeah, Lethal Weapon 2 we have to do. As you said, now that you've got it in my head, I was almost looking at this. And don't get me wrong, like I'd forgotten what I'd chosen until I was literally looking at my notes. Part of me was a little sad that it didn't say Armageddon. If I'm going to be brutally honest, you've sown the seed. We're going to have to do that double header soon, the disaster season. Maybe we could do a disaster season and do like all 4 of, when I think of as the big 90s action movies, which all felt like they probably didn't come out at the same time, but it felt like this big deal where you had the asteroid movies one year and then you had the volcano movies the next year.
I don't know if I could do the volcano movies.
I was going to say, I don't have the same attachment to the volcano movies. Like I've seen Dante's Peak. I've seen Was it just called Volcano?
Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah.
Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
I remember him being okay, whereas Deep Impact and Armageddon felt like massive cultural moments back in like the mid 90s. And I remember like them being a big deal and having those whole conversations about which one you preferred. And I'm genuinely interested to see if I would still prefer Deep Impact now, because it was close back in the day. They're different movies. I said I prefer Deep Impact. I've got a funny feeling I'm going to rewatch them and go, do you know what? Armageddon might be the greatest fucking movie I've ever seen. I've got a funny feeling that could happen.
If we're going to do a Pierce Brosnan film for the first one, is it the first one? Yeah, I think it's the first Pierce Brosnan. We're not going to do fucking Dante's Peak. We're going to do the Lawnmower Man.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something genuinely good, like, I don't know, GoldenEye, like one of, like, again, another one of those like important movies growing up because of the video game. Like, I wasn't like a Bond kid. Like, I didn't really grow up with the Sean Connery films or the Roger Moore ones. I remember watching the Timothy Dalton ones when they came out and they were fine. But despite that, the fact that I was never a Bond guy, so to speak, like GoldenEye, for obvious reasons for people of our age, it became this huge thing because of the video game. But it also happens to be one of the best modern Bond films. It's no surprise that the same dude who made that reinvented Bond again for Casino Royale, which arguably is my favorite Bond film. But anyway, we'll end up doing Lawnmower Man. Let's be fucking honest. That feels much more of our bread and butter. Have you rewatched that film? I rewatched it about a year ago. It's ass. It is ass, dude.
Do you want to know what's weird? Well, it's not weird. This is me we're talking about. I've seen Lawnmower Man 2 beyond cyberspace more than I've seen Lawnmower Man 1.
I mean, right, you could have just stopped with, I've seen Lawnmower Man 2, and that would be weird. Not for you, but it would be weird because who the fuck wants to watch Lawnmower Man 2? The fact that you've seen it more than the first one is insane. But the other thing is, have you ever read the original short story by Stephen King?
Yes.
Nothing to do with the movie.
To do with film.
Nothing to do with the movie whatsoever. It has a lot more to do with the title, but yeah, it's actually... I don't know. I can see why they've done it because I don't know how that short story, because it's fucking bananas. I don't know how that translates to on the screen. So they've obviously just taken the vague concept of it and gone in a different direction. Yeah. But Lawnmower Man, when I tried rewatching it, well, no, I did rewatch. I rewatched the whole thing. It's a rough ride. It's a rough ride, but I guess it'd be kind of fun to return to. Is that it? Are we going to end on Lawnmower Man? All right, let's just call it there. All right, I've been Liam. He's been Rob. And
I do have something to say. Sorry, I do have something.
Son of a...
Well, usually you go, have we got anything to add? The last couple of times I've said no.
Well, I thought you just said no. All right, go for it.
No. So we just had a message off Laura Jenkins, who said our podcast is keeping her entertained or keeping her company as she has the long drives up to Manchester way. She does that regularly. So you're welcome, I guess, if you're listening to our shtick as you're driving up to the...
Well, this sounds like it's been a pretty long... I mean, our podcast, we always say, it's like we get so into this groove where we don't time it or anything like that, but nearly all of our podcasts come out somewhere between an hour and 10 and an hour and 20 nowadays. Yeah. This feels like we may have rambled on past
I think we've gone up to the 90-minute plus mark
I think so.
On this one. But I will say, Laura, if you want to drop us a message and let us know if we haven't covered a film that you want us to cover for your drive up, give us a shout and... if you're listening
to the podcast and drive to Manchester, if you've got a specific movie in mind, Jesus Christ, there's plenty of movies out there. We're more than, Jesus Christ, the last time we took a suggestion, which we really didn't know anything about, was Cat People. And that turned into loads of fucking fun because that film is something else. By the way, if you haven't seen Cat People with, I was going to say Andy McDowell, it's not Andy McDowell. Malcolm.
Oh my God, I would watch it with Andy McDowell again.
I would totally. If you can somehow find that movie, if you're listening to this podcast, I suspect that movie is at least worth checking out for you because it is one of the stranger mainstream movies. It's not quite as strange as, I still think maybe the strangest mainstream movie we've covered is Life Force. Like going back to it, it's almost like I can't believe that was a thing. But Cat People is right up there. But
I think it will until we do the Prince of Darkness. When we do that, the rest of the End of the World trilogy, John Carpenter's, because the Prince of Darkness is odd. Yeah,
we haven't done a John Carpenter movie for a while, actually. Prince of Darkness is a good shout, but I guess we wait for Halloween. But anyway, we've been rambling on far long enough. So, am I okay to wrap this up now? We cool?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah? I'll let you. Cool. Okay, I've been Liam, he's Rob. You've been listening to You Guys podcast. See you next week. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
I will put this on the end. I will cut it off if we have to. But do you want to do your intro? Because you thought you did an intro. I'll let you add it to the podcast.
What was my intro? Yeah. I really thought it was mine. So my opening quote was, I saw this in a movie about a bus that had to speed around the city, keeping its speed over 50. And if its speed dropped, it would explode. I think it was called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down. I'm Liam, he's Rob. Welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. This week, we are finally taking a look back at what many consider to be one of the best action movies of the 90s. Up there with the likes of The Matrix, Total Recall, T2, The Rock, and Point Break. Jan de Boint's high-concept action and 1994's Speed is ultimately light on plot and common sense, but incredibly high in entertainment and chemistry. 30 years after its original release, though, does Speed still hold up, or is it finally showing its age? That's basically it. I kind of tripped over a bit, but I wasn't expecting to be doing this at the end of the podcast. So
there you go,
yes.
people. 2 speed intros for you. One at the end. Is that an outro?
I guess that is an outro, but it was an intro masquerading as an outro. I think that's what that is. All right, cheers, guys.
Give up on this fucking episode, can we?
Yeah,
cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!